And we are back. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. We've already told a few tonight. We've talked about the Janus decision and how it's impacting litigation against law boards and lawyers organizations nationwide. We talked about CBD as an oncoming element in folks' ordinary lives as we saw the first significant opening of a CBD center here in the Ocean State in Rhode Island. In our last segment, Alan Ghiberti, chairman of the local log cabin Republicans, talked about the First Amendment and Second Amendment rights in particular as they apply to the LGBTQ plus community. Joining me now, though, is, as I take a moment here, one of the great things about having an indie media show is you get to talk to all the people you really like to talk to. And sometimes you might not get a chance to, either because people are busy, might be out of your reach, might be above your state, whatever. You get a chance to have conversations with folks who really fulfill some astonishing roles in day-to-day life. And that's never been more true of who I'm talking to tonight. Kara Schultz is with us. She is with the Libertarian Party nationally. She's a political activist in the great state of Minnesota. She's also, incredibly enough, are you ready for this? She actually serves in public office. She does all of that. In the Libertarian Party nationally, she supports candidate issues, candidate rights, candidates, logistics. And so I wanted a chance to talk to her during sort of, and I'll say it's a lull, it's never really a lull, but a kind of a quiet period, if you will, in the run-up to the 2020 elections. We've had a couple of 2019 special elections, a few other things pop up. We've had some successes this week that we're going to talk about. Get a sense of her and how she came to be such an integral part of the libertarian liberty movement. And then I know she's got a special issue that she wants to talk about, and I believe it revolves around opioids, pain management, and things like that. So we've got about 50 minutes to talk, and we hope to cover it all. And I'm hoping this isn't the last time she'll join us. Kara, welcome to the Coalition.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, so this is, every Friday night we try to spend an hour with someone in the libertarian movement. And what I'm hoping to, in speaking with people like Elizabeth Brierly, is that Kara's going to be kind of, and she doesn't know this yet, but she's going to be on, I hope somewhat frequently, to sort of bookend some of the efforts that are going on with candidates nationally. Let's not kid ourselves. Getting libertarians elected is a challenge. We very often have to educate people as to exactly what a libertarian is. Sometimes we have to overcome urban legends, myth truths, sometimes outright lies perpetrated and perpetuated by our opposition. It's fair to say, Kara, that I don't think any of the duopoly is interested at any point, anytime, anywhere, any place, any shape or form in getting a libertarian elected. It's just not part of their quality day, is it?
No. It's a team sport, and we're not on their team. So.
And what's amazing is I've only been in the movement for a few years. It's amazing how just not part of the team we are. I mean, at this point, I think everybody hates us. We're fiscally conservative, but we really are, as opposed to budget busting Republicans. We actually truly believe in civil rights as opposed to pontificating Democrats. As I like to say, we supported marriage equality since 1970. Hell, we fought the war on drugs since there's been a war on drugs. I want to remind people that the war on drugs is funded in a truly bipartisan manner. Both Republicans and Democrats support the war on drugs, and we know what a failure that is. So we are the party of principle. So give us a little snapshot. How did you get involved with the libertarian movement?
So I was on the fringes of the libertarian movement probably starting 2008. And before that, I had an interest in politics, but it was a lighter interest in politics. One of the reasons being I had served in the military, and of course, while you can vote and you can have an opinion and that kind of stuff, they don't want you really active politics. Mm-hmm. So after that point, I started reading different libertarian philosophy. Also stumbled onto Ron Paul as well. met a few people who are libertarian and just started having more conversations with them. Then once Gary Johnson ran for president, and this was still when he was running on the GOP ticket, when he was trying to get on that ticket. And I heard him in interviews, and I was like, that's what I want to be a part of. And so I got interested in his campaign lightly, but once he made the jump to the Libertarian Party, I was all in. And I ended up chairing his campaign in Minnesota.
Interesting you say that, because that's exactly, I've told this story before. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. I was driving along in a northern central Massachusetts town at about 11 o'clock, I believe, one night in the middle of winter. And I was listening to a show on radio called Nightside, which is a Boston-based talk show. You can hear it in about 35 states. And they were talking to some guy, and he was talking about personal liberty and freedom, real true freedom of choice, and individual rights and self-direction. And I'm listening to this guy like, who the hell is this guy? Where have you been all my life? And so I call the guy, and he's running for president, and I get on phone with him. And he goes, hey, my name's Gary Johnson. Yep. And I don't know. Kara, I think you and I can say this, and there's a whole bunch of people who are either listening or going to listen to this, most likely, who will probably say, I don't know if that was a good moment or a bad moment, but it was life-changing. So yep. I know, and I'm just going to say this carefully, I know there's a temptation. I am now a proud member of the Libertarian Radical Caucus. There are those who got frustrated with times with Gary Johnson. I will tell you that Gary Johnson delivered a message to a lot of people, and there's a lesson to be learned from this, to a lot of people who might not have otherwise heard. And he changed a lot of people's lives, and had real impact on the party. And things at times may not have gone as well as we want, but I will always have great personal affection and tremendous respect for the efforts of Gary Johnson, both as governor of New Mexico, as a candidate for the presidency in the Libertarian Party twice, and really any efforts he goes forward. I find him to be an individual of great integrity, and he was a tremendous public servant, as well as an entrepreneur, an adventurer, and I think in many ways exhibits some of the very best of America. And don't know how people will feel about that, but it's something I feel very strongly about. I felt the need to say that. So you came from a military background. Well, by the way, so many folks, I mean, the great vice chairman of the Libertarian Party of the state of Rhode Island is a military veteran. Why do you think the military is such a great way to meet future libertarians? What's unique about that experience?
Because many people who join the military are doing so because they want to actively defend civil rights. They want to actively defend our rights, as citizens in this country. And they feel so strongly about it that they are willing to sign up and join in the military with the understanding that they could be sent somewhere to fight in something they don't want to really fight in. And no one really wants to ever go to war. But people do that because they feel so strongly about it. And that's why I think military and military vets they're libertarians. Almost all of them are libertarians, whether they know it or not.
Right. And it's really our responsibility. In a few minutes, we'll get into some of the work you do. Mm-hmm. I will never get frustrated with a voter because I believe it's our responsibility to reach out to people and explain to them what a libertarian is. It is. Voters, there's a lot of folks in the movement who will get frustrated with voters because they voted for the Democrat, they voted for the Republican. They fill in the blanks. There's some pejorative connotation that they'll use. Sadly, for a lot of different reasons, folks have lost really track of understanding what their civil liberties are. They don't understand the Constitution the way they should. They don't understand the political process the way they should. They may have been raised in a home that's biased towards one of the duopoly. 1,000 different reasons. Isn't it our responsibility as libertarians to reach out to them and somehow grab a hold of their attention?
It is. And when people are articulating a problem that they have or a challenge that they're facing, and they're saying a specific issue, something's causing them pain in some way, if our response is to brush them off or to just say, oh, the market will decide, or any of those types of platitudes, we've done a disservice to them and also to spreading the message of liberty. Because what we need to do, whether we are candidates, activists, party members, whatever, what we need to do is address the problem that they are facing and give them a solution that is a libertarian solution, a specific solution to the challenge that they're facing. And we need to be able to articulate that. It doesn't always have to be a government solution, and oftentimes it will not be a government solution to their problem. But it does need to be a solution that solves the pain point they are experiencing.
And as a result, we need to incorporate people who may or may not meet the litmus test for being a full libertarian. It's a journey,
right.
Really, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
It's not everyone in our movement is a deist who believes in God. So I use this analogy to describe them as well as people who do it. Faith in a higher power is a journey one reaches. As a child, you're very often inculcated in a particular discipline, a religious background, whether it be Quaker, Lutheran, Catholic, Jewish. One reaches adulthood, and in the same manner that they reach their own religious conclusion, they have to find and follow their own political path. As I always joke, I'm probably one of the few people who'll meet who not only admit, but actually volunteered for Richard Nixon. Okay, so I was a member of CREEP, the Committee for the Re-election of the President, 1972. I was 11 years old. Yikes. So if I'd been shut off at that path, I would never have had the incredibly marginal impact I've had on the libertarian movement. But, post 9/11, I lost personal friends on 9/11. I spent a good deal of my life, ironically, I'd been outsourced out of a job, a year or two before, but I spent a great deal of my life working in and around the World Trade Center in New York. The company I worked for lost 300 people. I was prime neocon material, and I became a neocon. Hi, my name is Pat. I was a neocon. And so if I was dismissed out of hand at that point in time, I grew up. And if that sounds like a shot at neocons, guilty. I grew the hell up. I started to look around the world and understand that there were issues that were nuanced, that were not simply black and white, and not somehow, as the magical statement at the time was, turning fill in the blank into a sheet of glass was not the answer and not the solution. So, we all go through a journey, and we have to find a way to respect that of other people, because that's how we grow our movement. I'll point out historically the Shaker movement. Are you familiar with the Shaker movement?
I am.
All right. So if anyone might say, younger people might say, what's the Shaker movement? You don't know, because the Shaker movement didn't allow people to have children. The libertarians, we can't be like the Shaker movement. We have to have children. We have to spawn, procreate, whatever. But enough about my thoughts. You're actually involved in governing, aren't you?
I am.
Tell us about that. And so much of your work is campaign support. I think what gives you a lot of legitimacy is the fact that you're not only advising people, you've actually walked the walk, and you're simultaneously performing it. Tell us about your experience with that.
Sure. Okay. So in 2014, I ran for local office, and one of the reasons why I ran for local office was after the 2012 election, Gary Johnson was asking libertarians to run for local office, and he was making a concerted effort to ask people in 2013. He went around and said, please run for local office. We need libertarians to run for local office. And so a few of us in Minnesota did. Elizabeth Dahl did in Minnesota, Olga Parsons did, I did, a few others did. We ran for local office in 2014. Olga and Elizabeth were elected. Roger Paris was also elected to office. I got really close. I almost knocked off an incumbent. And I kept a record of everything I did, when I did it, how I could have done better, what I wish I had done, what I wasted time on. I kept very detailed notes because I knew I was going to run again in 2016. If I was that close, man, I was going to do it again. So the city that I live in is Burnsville, Minnesota, and it is a city of 61,000 people. And when you run for city council, it's at large. So you have to campaign the entire city. And we vote. I mean, we have a very high percentage of voters. In fact, our county in the last election had the highest voting percentage in the country. Wow. So we vote. So when you're campaigning for the entire city, you are definitely campaigning in the entire city. So in 2016, I ran again. At the same time, I was also chairing Governor Johnson's next run for president. And a few months prior to when I filed to run for office, I found out that I had stage 3 colon cancer. And, you know, that was a time when I had to pause and really think, you know, do I want to take on running for office while I'm quite realistically fighting for survival? And I decided, yeah, I did. I did want to do that. I also wanted to chair Garrett Johnson's campaign, and that's where I was going to put my energy. And so, yeah, when I campaigned, when I door knocked and I went full out, it was when I was doing chemotherapy. I was ill, but, you know, I did it every day. I mean, and I did it every day. I went out door knocking for hours every single day, because when you run for office and you want to win, when you want to win elected office, that's what you have to do. It's direct voter contact. And you either really want it or you don't. And there's nothing else in between. So if you're kind of wishy-washy on it, that's fine. Run as an informational candidate or run as a choice candidate. But if you put it out to people that you are running to win and you are accepting donations and you are having people volunteer to help you, then you get your ass out there and you knock every frickin' door. So I wasn't supposed to win for multiple reasons. I definitely wasn't the chosen candidate. The powers that be had picked who was going to have that seat. They had the money. They had the volunteers. They had all the connections. But I had the drive. And I also connected with voters on what their challenges were and met them where they were and worked on solutions to their challenges. So it was about connecting one-on-one with voters. And yeah, when election night rolled around and I won, many people were pretty stunned in my city.
Wow. Wow. To hang out there for a second. I'm sure they were. You got me on that one. So you're in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
You've done the door-to-door thing.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if you're from New England, understand that we base Minnesota on a couple of things. Hubert Humphrey, the Twins,
Yeah.
the Vikings never winning a Super Bowl, and it snows. Actually, it does snow all year round, right?
You know, we might be getting snow this next week, so pretty much.
All right. You guys are, and the fact that you folks are incredibly polite, which if you're a Northeasterner is really troubling on a really base level. All right. You know, I've seen you at the convention. We've only met a couple times. I've seen you at the convention confronted with some really self-absorbed people. Yeah. about that. Sorry about that. But be incredibly polite, despite the fact that the person in front of you was acting like an idiot. So I'll just say that. I can't imagine who I'm talking about. Anyhow, but you talk about making a personal connection. You know, I'll go back to the Clinton campaign of all things. You know, it was, you know, the famous statement in the Clinton war room was, it was about the economy, stupid, because they recognized at that point in time, and somehow the Republicans completely missed it, that it was lunch pail politics in that presidential election. People were concerned with their own economic future. I don't doubt they did extensive polling, but they also opened their eyes to the polling. You know, folks do all sorts of sample research all the time, but still only see what they want to see or what they happen to be obsessed about, whatever the issue is. It could be 2A, it could be weed, it could be taxes, education. Talk about that. How you make it sound so simple. How does a candidate, particularly a grassroots individual from a somewhat unknown party to many, what are the ways that they can connect with a voter?
So connecting with a voter, number one, you have to treat them with respect. Mm-hmm. When you are knocking on their door, for instance, you've interrupted their evening. There is no one sitting at home going, you know what I really wish would happen tonight? Some frickin' politician or candidate to knock on my door. That just doesn't happen. So you have to be respectful in realizing that you are interrupting their evening, and yet they still decided to open the door and talk to you. So you need to have a level of respect on that. The other way that you connect with, potential voters is you ask them what they're concerned about. Because candidates can run their campaign one or two ways. You can either campaign on stuff you care about, and that's fine. If you want to be an issue candidate, you're pushing forward an issue, that's fine. Or you can campaign, solve the problems they care about. Successful candidates campaign on what their constituents care about. Mm-hmm. And we don't have the money to do polling. So unlike Republicans and Democrats, we can't do like issue polling and that type of thing, for the most part. You know, that gets into, $15,000, $30,000, $60,000. Right. What we can do, though, is you can do like a test door knock. You can spend 2 weeks very early in your campaign, even before you announce, when you're just exploring your run. And you can knock on doors around your area, spread it out. And just introduce yourself and say, I'm considering running for office. And in preparing for my run, I would like to know what challenge you think is the greatest one facing our city. Mm-hmm. What are you most concerned about? And then find out what that is and write it down. Pretty soon it's going to emerge very quickly what is top of mind on the people in your city. And then you're going to pick those top 2, top 3, top 4, whichever you're comfortable with, mm-hmm. and come up with what is your solution to each one of those challenges. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're going to run on, and that's how you connect with people. But always be very respectful. One thing that I did was when I door knocked and someone spoke with me, that evening I wrote them a thank you note. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me about issue X. I hope after you're able to research a little further that I can count on your support November 5th. And I did that every evening. Every evening I spent an hour to 2 hours writing my thank you notes, dropped them off in the mail in the morning. Mm-hmm.
Now, how many terms have you served now?
So I am still in my first term because it's 4 years. So I was elected in 2016. Okay. So I'm always up on a presidential year.
Yikes.
Right?
Any early word? How have you, well, this is actually a question, sadly, I don't get to ask of many libertarians. I know a couple guys in New Hampshire who did yeoman's work, and I know there's some other folks out there, but on a day-to-day basis, now you're in a city council, correct?
Yes.
Of a size, by Rhode Island, a sizable city. This is no mere burg. You've got all the traditional issues facing a town of that size. You've got a school department, that's probably hopelessly out of control, that probably does everything they can to torment you. You've got OPED and public pension issues potentially. You've got all these things. What's it like to actually govern, or try to whatever degree, govern as a libertarian? And what were people's reactions to your libertarianness?
So when I joined city council, both, city council and city staff, they were all very gracious towards me. But they were also wondering, what the heck is going to happen? What is she going to do? Because sometimes there is a view of libertarians as they're going to get in there and they're just going to be all like, F the government, right?
Right.
And be very adversarial. And I know that whether it's in government or any type of working group, any group that you join, you get things done by forming relationships, building coalitions, and they can be on specific issues. Not every city councilor and the mayor is going to vote with me on every issue.
Right.
But I know all I need is 2 other votes. That's all I'm fishing for on every issue is 2 other votes. Can I get them to say yes? Can I get them to say no? That's my goal. So who are going to be those 2 votes? And I do have different people on council that vote with me on certain issues. I've been able to get quite a bit done because I've worked hard to earn their trust. They know when I say I am for or against something, I really do mean it. I'm not going to be bought off by anyone. There's no horse trading with me. It's just not going to happen. I don't trade votes. And so they know that my behavior is predictable and reliable, and they figured out where my ethical basis is.
Right.
So that's how you govern. You form relationships, and then you find your coalitions around very specific issues. I definitely do not win every vote by any means, but I've gotten a ridiculous amount done.
Give us some examples, because I mean, this is this is edge of your seat if you're a libertarian. You're just sitting here going, "Wow, she's elected. Wow, she's." Give us some of your favorite moments, if you will.
Okay, so you can do small things, and they seem small, but they actually do matter in people's lives. But they also start to get the philosophy forward, such as in Burnsville, we eliminated pet licensing.
Wow.
You had to license your dogs and cats and all that kind of stuff. And, it seems like a really small thing, but how you do a small thing and how you do a large thing is the exact same way. And that is, you bring it forward as an item to discuss, and then you give the background information on it, on why that action should or shouldn't be taken. And so I had the information and I had these studies on why did pet licensing even start in the United States? What was the purpose of it? Does it serve a purpose now? And the answer was no, it really didn't serve a purpose now. The other issue was, are people complying with it? And the answer was no. People were not complying with it. So why would you have something that serves no purpose and your citizenry is not complying with? So we were able to just eliminate that. Now that's a small thing, but that sets the stage of trust and getting people to understand and getting yourself to understand what the process is on that. So now we're doing things like we have eliminated building height in our city. We had a cap on like 4 stories.
Wow.
Which really crushed development. And we're in a major metro area. Like, we're not a small town on the edges. We're a major metro area attached to the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. So anytime you touch issues of zoning, man, that's, that gets into really hot button issues. But we looked at it and said, does this even make sense anymore? And, someone asked, well, what if someone wants to do a 20-story building? Well, that takes special materials once you build above a certain height, and that's actually very expensive. So if someone has that kind of money, they're going to do it right. You know, that's going to be an amazing, awesome thing. But probably that's not going to happen. Like, just the cost of it is it's not going to happen. But it could. We're also going to be taking up, and we're looking at this. I don't have this through, but we're just going to start taking a look at this, consolidating all of our zoning for business, because you have all these categories of business zoning, right? And changing all of it to mixed use, which means it can be used for any type of business, and it can be residential too. It can really be anything. So now you have developers that don't have to come before you and ask for special permission to do X, Y, or Z because it's slightly coloring outside the lines. But it's consolidating your zoning so that it's not all of these really tiny, really rigid, segmented areas. So these are the types of things that you can start to really get into. And this is, truthfully, removing government. It is consolidating. It is getting to smaller government.
I mean, you could actually, let's take it one step further. You've removed government. You've consolidated government. You know, this is not some pie in the sky concept to you. What you've actually done, and I get it, because on one hand, incrementalism, if you're a libertarian, can be very frustrating. On the other hand, you have actually restored property rights to individuals, and you're using the successes of that and the lessons from that to continue to restore property rights to individuals. I mean, you look at licensing is such a huge issue for libertarians nationally, and it's one that speaks to economic equality, and one that we can market really across the nation. If we get away from all this crazy occupational licensing, and folks like 1889 and and Fee and Reason have done all sorts of studies of this. That's how we promote economic opportunity, well, for everyone. But it's a bogeyman. There's this fear, oh my God, what will happen? More licenses, right? So, this, you talk about Gary's point about local office. I had a conversation with a young man earlier this week, and he's ready to run for high office, and this points so aptly to the importance of town boards and city councils and board of educations. You will change more lives as a member of a town council. You will introduce liberty into more forms as a member of a town council than I would imagine many legislators can during their entire time serving, based on how very often legislatures are geared towards majority power by a single leader who is a member of the duopoly. You are the ultimate example of break glass, instant liberty. It's really that straightforward. And so Gary was right, and I think you see the movement nationally. Now I know you're your position, you're involved in candidate support, so by definition you're not political now. So I'm not going to ask you to be political per se, but clearly there is a trend being championed by many, including myself, to gear ourselves towards town boards, educational, because of just that. Now you have built, by doing this, you've accomplished things that even really can't be calculated. All of a sudden, there's a libertarian in office in a town in Minnesota, which is amongst the more liberal states in the nation.
Yes.
Again, Hubert Humphrey, National Public Radio, 2 words, Garrison Keillor. Okay. So all of a sudden, libertarian is not an abstract term on the Drudge Report or on some faraway, Capitol Hill website. Libertarian is not something you talked about. I always use a comparison. We also, in world cultures, we talked about political organizations and religious ones. We got a kick out of the Zoroastrians, and we made fun of the Libertarians in 1978, okay? Because they were the ones who wanted to sell everything to everybody. You are, by getting elected to this and actually engaging in creating liberty, you have created an example in that area so that no one will look at a libertarian the same again. You've actually blazed a trail for other libertarians to run for elected office in your sort of world scope there in that part of Minnesota, and people will see them as not only a philosophy, but as a successful individual operating within the framework of government to create liberty. And that, as they say in the old MasterCard commercial, is priceless. You simply, we've had some successes in Rhode Island. You hear us talk about it all the time. It's still relatively recent. It's important to us, but we beat a stadium subsidy by a significant, by the Boston Red Sox. Now, we actually have Rhode Islanders now saying, because of that concerted effort, saying things like that company, government has no place interfering in private markets. I've heard regular people say that. And that's how you blaze a trail. That's the future of the party.
It is. And first you got to run. And then once you get elected, you have to govern. And when you're governing, you are under a bit of a microscope, because people really want to know, what does it mean when a libertarian governs? And in 2018, we had another libertarian run for office to join me on Burnsville City Council. And it was a tough race, but he's in. So now there's two of us on Burnsville City Council.
Oh my God. Next thing you know, there's going to be a revolution. People will be dancing in the streets.
Right?
That's outstanding. And that's, I think we need to do more to spread that success story, because again, that's if we've had a situation here in Rhode Island where it's shifted very hard to the left from a state that was already hard to the left. And the progressive movement in the state did exactly that. They first volunteered for boards. They moved up to the next level and got elected to some stuff. Now, all of a sudden, they are a major voting bloc in the state legislature. The challenge, of course, for them is, as a wise philosopher once said, rut-row, they actually have to govern. And
yeah, they do. Yeah. So now they have to show that their solutions work.
Right. And I think we know how that movie ends. And it doesn't usually end well. Now, first of all, if you're just joining us, and whether you're watching this in the future on our podcast or on our YouTube channel, Kara Schultz is joining us. She occupies a number of roles. She is an elected Libertarian city council person in Minnesota. She works diligently in campaign and candidate support for the Libertarian Party, the National Libertarian Party. She's joining us. This hour, of course, is sponsored by Beacon Shipping and Logistics, beaconshippingandlogistics.com. Kara, you probably didn't know this, but there's a Rhode Island-based automobile shipper who ships nationally. So should you have a car that you want to go to a family member, a cherished family member, or if you buy, I'm thinking for you, Mustang convertible, you buy that Mustang. No, I'm serious. Black on black Mustang convertible. It's you, okay? If you want that Mustang convertible that you bought on eBay, Beacon Shipping and Logistics.com. They can ship it nationwide from dealers via eBay, Facebook Auto, you name it, insured. And they're willing, incredibly enough, Kara, you've got private organizations in the bluest state of America willing to support this show with their sponsorship. Takes a lot of gumption to do that, as they would say in the Midwest. Is that a good Midwest word, gumption? Takes a lot of gumption to do that. So, want to thank them. Karen, you've got another issue that you wanted to talk about, correct? You wanted to talk about the opioid epidemic and pain management. Are you still?
Yes.
Okay. Give us, and you laid out some very personal details at the beginning of the show. You did suffer from an advanced stage of colon cancer. It did not get you down. People, I got to tell you, when you're a certain age, you're surrounded by people who've been very ill. You've lost some, you've won some. I don't know that I've ever met anyone brave and tough enough, maybe it was your military training, whatever, to actually run for and win a high elected office while suffering. That's astonishing. But tell me about your concerns and how you're looking to advance this issue.
Sure. Okay. So what we're seeing both federally and in states across the country is a movement to restrict pain medication.
Right.
And they are advancing a erroneous narrative. And the narrative is that and they'll call it the opioid crisis. You hear about the opioid crisis all the time. And really, it's a heroin and fentanyl crisis. It is street drugs. But they're advancing the narrative that it's caused by prescription drugs. And what happened was, you know, years ago, up until probably about like 2000, 2012, people who are advocating for people who suffer addictions to have proper treatment and to not be treated like garbage and thrown away. They were talking about how, you know, the heroin epidemic was really taking root. But the problem was most of America looked at that and went, yeah, they're human garbage, and I hope they overdose and die. Like they deserve it. So they were getting nowhere with this whatsoever. And, you know, and addicts were suffering, and, you know, there was a lot of shame and stigma to it. But at about that time, they came up with a different narrative. And this one really captured people's attention and caused a lot of empathy and sympathy and caused people to look at addiction in a different way. And the narrative was, you could be going along, you get into a car accident, and you're in the hospital, and, you know, of course, they're treating your pain with, opioids, and before you know it, you're hooked. And it's through no fault of your own, you know, this was no moral quandary. You just all of a sudden realized you were hooked and you couldn't do anything about it, and we have to help these people. So people looked at that, and a lot of people said, you know, I had surgery and they gave me pain medication. My God, I could have been hooked. And so people really took that message in, and there was a lot more sympathy and a lot more willingness to help people facing addiction. And it's kind of sad that they had to go that route just to be decent human beings, right? The problem with that narrative is it is 99% bullshit. So when you look at people taking pain medication, if they're taking pain medication under the care of a doctor and they've been screened for a prior addiction, like they don't have a history of addiction, there is a 1% or less addiction rate. Wow. So it's not pain medication. But there's two things with that. They still want to help people with addiction. And also, pharmacy, you know, big pharma has deep pockets. And so you have states and the federal government looking to punish and get money from big pharma to fund other government programs, because drug dealers, really, it's hard to find them, you know, like they don't pay fines, right? And you can try to sue them, but they're probably not going to show up in court. So it has really gained steam in the last few years. The CDC in 2016 put out guidelines which were supposed to be voluntary. And it was on primary care doctors for prescribing pain medication. And it was just supposed to be some voluntary guidelines. What happened was those were grabbed onto as if they had this strength of law. And the DEA also grabbed onto them as well. So they didn't just apply it to primary care doctors. They were applying it to everyone. They were applying it even into oncology, orthopedic surgery, palliative care. And if you were prescribing more than 7 days worth of pain medication, that doctor was now considered an outlier. And the DEA started busting these doctors, making them perp walk. They were shutting them down. And this is continuing. And doing civil asset forfeiture on these doctors, taking their houses, their cars, taking their business, taking the patient records, which now the patients would have to individually petition to get a copy of their records so that they can be treated by another doctor. Right. And so doctors across the country just went, okay, I am not prescribing pain medication. Right. And so we are seeing a crisis happening. And we now see states that are taking the CDC guidelines and making them into law, making more monitoring programs, invading patient privacy, interfering in the doctor-patient relationship. So we have suicides are climbing, which the CDC acknowledges that there's now an increase in suicides from this, because people are being left in unendurable agony They're just being dumped. We have doctors that are discharging patients from their service, not because the patient doesn't need to be seen, not because the patient doesn't need to be treated, but because the doctors are terrified that they're going to be busted by the DEA.
Here in Rhode Island, the first they established a prescription medical database.
Mm-hmm.
In this last legislative session, they managed to sneak through a provision now that you can do a warrantless search, incredibly enough, of the Rhode Island State Prescription Medical Database. It's precisely for these reasons. You know, I mean, folks, you know, we're fortunate here in Rhode Island. We have a very strong chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union who fights this incessantly, but there is still the attitude, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about. And, and I cannot, well, you're right, the level of pain that individuals are in, particularly who had as a response to some severe cancers, highly disruptive surgeries, whether it be colonoscopies, or any one of a number of, you know, not just colon cancer, but Crohn's disease, things like that, where folks are just in agony. I mean, literally virtual agony, and are unable to, I mean, we're at this cross-section of American pain management where we have, at least here in the Northeast, we're taking successful medical cannabis programs and we're twisting them up and twisting them around to conform to government's both need to turn into a cash cow, incredibly enough. Where, because we still have classified cannabis as a narcotic, we can't do any original federal-based or hopefully market-based research into what the real benefits are. Right now it's anecdotal, so that we can find out once and for all what lies there, what opportunity lies there for a non-opioid pain prescription. And then, you're right, at the same time, we're denying people who have built up, at least on an anecdotal level, what I've seen situations where people have built up resistance, and then all of a sudden we're literally making them take half pills a day and cutting pills.
Yeah.
And now what you've got, and this is confounding, well, it's not confounding to me. You know, I'm a libertarian. I've given up hope on the government. But you've got this government-induced artificial nightmare of epic proportions because you've got people who were on successful medical cannabis programs because of state interference are being pushed back into the streets to use dangerous wet medicine. The state still refuses to engage in any type of research or authorize or declassify or decertify, if you will, from level. None of this need be happening. There are people for whom, at this point in their lives or disease or their medical situations, only going to react positively to some opioid-based painkiller.
Yes. Yep.
It's just that.
Yep. Yeah, because there's different pain receptors also in different parts of your body, and anything happening in your abdomen in particular, opioids work really well on that type of pain, and other pain medications do not. So you have all these complexities, and I mean, the gold standard of medical care is supposed to be individualized care. You know, your doctor works with you to come up with an individual plan that works for you in your specific situation. And what we have is politicians saying, nope, I'm going to give one size all. I'm going to make these very arbitrary rules. And if any of you violate this rule, then, you know, we're going to try to jail the doctor. We're going to take their things. We're also going to make these databases where we put everyone on this list who's receiving pain medication, but we're not going to tell them that we've put them on this list, but we're going to start collecting data on them.
Right.
So there's all kinds of privacy violations. But yeah, when you look at the number one reason that people go on disability, for instance, it's unmanaged pain. And many people who were leading productive lives, they were able to take care of their children, they were able to work, they were able to find some enjoyment in their life. And at this point now, they are bedridden. They're prisoners in their own home. And there's a lot of shame because if people mention that they're in so much agony and they need their pain medication, people hear that and think that they're an addict. You need drugs? What's wrong with you? Can't you just gut it out? You know, so there's this really funky view that we have on it. So if you're seeing people that you used to see before out and about, and now you're just not seeing them anymore, this is probably what's going on in their life. Their life is a living hell. There's a reason why Human Rights Watch has opened a file on the United States for medical torture, and it relates to politicians interfering and refusing to allow doctors to treat pain.
Wow.
It's absolutely disgusting.
You know, we've just got literally a couple minutes left. This is an area I'd like. I was fortunate enough to at least be able to report on the. I was able to report on the Right to Try movement. Not that I was any sort of politically involved in supporting it, because, I was there. Started becoming aware of it towards the end, and that's the opposite end of the medical spectrum. For folks who haven't been associated with Right to Try, that's where you've got experimental medicines that there is now federal legislation in place finally that allows people to try them, when they are clearly past stage 4 and they're in the end game in opposing cancers. As a libertarian, it sounds almost to be heresy to talk about a federal solution to this, but until we create libertarian paradise, we have to work with an existing system. The Goldwater Institute, who actually ironically was on earlier in the show, did yeoman's work in the Right to Try. One of the things I'd like to explore with you in ongoing shows is exactly what can be done from that in terms of, I know that there's a couple of national organizations, and interestingly enough, because the state of Rhode Island has been screwing with the medical cannabis program, we were starting to reach out as our show to national pain management associations because of that aspect of it. So now, I can't think of a more respectful way to put it. You've got this pincer-like movement. You've got states for whom medical cannabis is a significant part of their pain management program. And now you've got states interfering with folks for whom opioids are a successful part of their pain management program. And they're basically leveling people individually and turning them, just again, on a basic human level, you're destroying these people. And I can't even imagine. This is, from a libertarian perspective, this is why government should not be involved in healthcare.
Absolutely.
I mean, the irony, of course, is that the most well-known oath on the planet, incredibly enough more well-known than the NAP, is the Hippocratic Oath, which is to do no harm. Yeah. And yet, because of extra legal governmental pressures, you've got to, as you point out so aptly, and I've realized from other angles, the medical community is in the position of being forced legally to at least create an environment where harm occurs as a result of extra legal government efforts, which of course, as usually are hopelessly misplaced, have no foundation in knowledge or science whatsoever, and are simply a knee-jerk reaction to whatever outrage porn is being transpired by the national media at any one time, if I can sum it up, Counselor.
That's exactly what's happening. And, already in Minnesota, we're seeing suicides. I mean, people I know, we're seeing suicides from this. So the fallout from what has already happened is horrific, and it's going to snowball. It's going to snowball sharply.
Well, I've got to sign off now, so this is sort of the cliffhanger. Let's put this as a cliffhanger, and let's you and I knock heads offline on what we can do from our own little bully pulpits, our own little worlds, to bring attention to the cause. So first of all, I want to thank you for coming on. As usual, your presentation was brilliant, and remarkably personal, and I am grateful for you to sharing that with us. As I said, we'll get this on YouTube and get this out on the podcast right away, because you conveyed about half a dozen or so highly powerful messages in the space of about 50 minutes, which is, if I get one a week, I'm good. That's what I'm shooting for. But I thank you so much for coming on, and let's continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Pat.
Well, again, Kara Schultz, she is with the National Libertarian Party. She works in candidate support. She is a road warrior on that aspect. But most importantly, tonight she spoke to issues revolving around not only the life of the candidate and gave us some personal tips there, but also talked about, well, what happens when you win? Yikes. We finished up with a rather poignant conversation surrounding the rights of the patient. And as important as the libertarian issues are, my takeaway tonight is that we covered some pretty important ground with regard to basic human rights. And again, I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful night, and I'm sure you and I will talk soon. Folks, we're going to sign off right now. As always, we've gone late. Thanks to Joe, our operator here, for keeping us sane. Folks, we are the Coalition, loud and proud. As always, we are outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center. Should you listen to this in the coming days or tonight, we'd ask you to follow us at facebook.com/thecoalitionradio, on the mighty Twitter at @coalition_radio. Go to coalitionradio.us where you'll see a link to our YouTube channel, and we've got our podcast up and running. It'll be up on iHeart shortly. It's on Spreaker now, where you can listen to this and some shows from 5, 6, 7 years ago. Some pretty provocative shows. Actually, we're getting to work this week on a presidential candidate who had a couple of libertarian ones who had a couple of run-ins in Belize. One of the more fascinating interviews in our show history. So we'll be certain to put that out to Planet Libertarian. And again, a very special thank you to Kara Schultz for joining us this evening live on a Friday night. Folks, you understand you have a lot of choices to make in terms of your programming, where you can watch, where you can spend your time. We want to thank you for spending time with us tonight or in the future. Stay tuned.